Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Annette Gawron Roberts. Welcome to a Day in the Life series. This one is on pediatrics, so a day in the life of a pediatrician. I'm your host, Annette, and just to tell you a little bit about me, I have been working with MST for a very long time, since 2017. I went to undergrad at the University of Florida, go Gators for any of the Florida people out there. I went to medical school at St. George's University, so shout out to any IMGs. And if you have any IMG specific questions, we can definitely talk about it later on. And now I'm a second year medical student. I'm a second year resident at Miami Children's or Nicholas Children's Hospital here in Miami. And I have an aspiration to become a pediatric gastroenterologist. So I'm applying for fellowship this summer. So let's jump into our webinar. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is just what residency is like. Of course, I'm sure you guys are aware, residency is very different from actually specializing. And I don't think all of us know exactly what residency is going to be like going in, besides, talking to other residents that you might be working with. So it's kind of nice to see what residency in pediatrics is like, what a day-to-day life is like when you're in residency. I'll tell you my favorite part of residency, and then we can kind of wrap up and just talk about the field and, kind of next steps going forward. And then, of course, we'll have our question and answer at the end. Okay, and so before we get started, I just wanted to bring up Med School Tutors. I mentioned to you that I've been working with MST since 2017. I worked as a tutor for step one. And then I did a lot of CS tutoring. Now I'm actually doing a lot of residency advising. So this is a perfect time for you guys to ask any questions you have about residency applications in general. And then I also do some other stuff for MST, like blog posting and being on their Reddit account and things like that. So basically, in general, Med School Tutors is online tutoring, one-on-one online tutoring, anywhere from pre-med all the way into residency and beyond, like even for board prep. And we are a group, a family, I like to call it, of students, residents, attendings who've done very well on our exams, and we love to teach. And we have a great administrative group that's awesome and there for like all the students. And so if you have any questions about MST along the way, I'd be happy to answer those questions as well. Okay, so let's talk about pediatric residency. So most pediatric residencies, if you just do the general pediatric residency, not doing like a combined program, which there are combined programs out there, is usually 3 years. And most programs have a 4th year chief resident option. There are some programs where you could be a chief in the 3rd year, so something to pay attention to when you're applying. And pediatric residency is made up of a block schedule. So it's very diverse blocks. It's really interesting to talk to people outside of medicine because every month I'm doing something different. And I feel like every month, people can't keep up with my schedule. Like my husband can barely keep up with my schedule because every block is different. And I love that. I think that's so interesting. It keeps things different. If you have a really tough rotation, then at least you have, the next block to look forward to. So, granted, this is my experience. These are most of the residency programs that I apply to are like this. I'm sure you can probably find a couple of programs that are a little different, maybe 2-week blocks or maybe combine it a little bit more. But roughly speaking, you have to go through different rotations in residency. So inpatient wards, that's basically when you think of hospitalist medicine, just kids who are getting admitted to the hospital. Maybe they need IV antibiotics for a treatment of like an pneumonia or infection, or they're being admitted for observation or management of like respiratory conditions, maybe a Crohn's flare, things like that. ER is what you think of, emergency department. You see it's like outpatient, but a little bit more critical. So most of the programs have at least one block. Our program actually, the program I go to has ED as a rotation every single year. Then you have your NICU and your ICUs in general. So neonatology, pediatric ICU, you do a newborn block, you'll do clinical medicine. So lots of clinic time, doing general pediatrics. Also, most programs, actually, I think all programs, so this is a requirement in residency, you need to be doing continuity care clinic. So usually you'll have clinic a couple of days. I actually had my clinic today and it went late, which hence my scrubs. Neurodevelopment is another one, LS in medicine. That is actually the rotation I'm currently on. And then you have all your different subspecialty electives that is great if you when you want to explore a field or if you're just not sure, and then just in general to make your general pediatric background stronger. And then of course that kind of goes in with your electives of choice as well. So why pediatrics? And I can go on forever about why pediatrics is such a great field, but these are kind of the ones that I thought about that I felt like would be good points to talk about. So one of the best things about pediatrics, in my opinion, is that it's such a broad field and there's so many subspecialties to choose from. And going through, my rotations, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with my life moving forward. So that's why I really like pediatrics, because I knew the doors were open for me after residency. And it's nice that you have subspecialties. So if you don't end up really liking Gen Peds, you always have all these different options. You could do fully like hospitalist medicine. You could do a combination of outpatient, inpatient. So the field is broad and there's a lot you can do in pediatrics. Also, I love that it's such a wide age range. So even today, to give you a perfect example, one of my first clinic patients of the morning was a kid who just left the NICU. He was a 26.2 weeker, had just left the NICU 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and then was here just for his regular follow-up. So I was basically seeing a 2-month-old premature infant. And then the next patient was siblings, like teenage siblings, who I ended up referring to adolescent medicine because they were having issues with their menses. So it's really, you see so much. It's such a wide age range, and it keeps every interaction, every encounter different. You don't know what to expect, and each age range brings a lot of entertainment, to say the least. And also pediatric residency offers a lot of variety, which I kind of talked about already. So I won't go into that too much, but in general, lots of variety. So people who work in pediatrics are often warm and friendly. I have to say, not everyone is, but the majority are. And I wanted to specify people because it's not just the doctors. You work with a team on the floor. So you're working with social workers who are one of my most favorite group of people in residency. They're amazing individuals and they truly, truly care about the patients. You have the case managers, you have the nurses who are so wonderful. You have the secretaries. I even like one of the secretaries on our in our inpatient block floor will give all the residents and the doctors and NPs like cafecitos in the morning. It's wonderful. We have the NPs, we have the attending. So there's so many different people that you're working with, and we all have a common goal of caring about our pediatric patients. And I would say most often, all those people are very approachable and warm and friendly and genuinely care about the well-being of their patients. And then I would say pathology is very interesting in the pediatric population. You're seeing a lot of congenital diseases that you wouldn't see in an adult rotation or an adult residency. For example, congenital heart diseases like hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and all the different interesting surgeries that come with that, like Fontan procedures. Then you see all sorts of different genetic disorders that you read in the books and you literally see them in real life. And then also that childhood cancers are super interesting. I mean, you can go on so many different cool pathologies. And of course, sometimes it can be very sad, but a lot of the times it's very interesting, straight from the textbook kind of pathologies. And then of course, I had to put this in because we always say it, but working with kids is so much fun. And you could just be goofy with kids. You can laugh with them, even when they're crying, you can like cheer them up. And just in general, kids are fun. Kids tend to get better. And it's just a very nice, positive, and fun working environment. And then of course, maybe I'm a little biased, but pediatric residents are pretty cool. All right. So why did I choose pediatrics? So there's a lot of reasons that I chose pediatrics. Just to give you a background, I actually was dead set on OBGYN for a very long time. I think it was, I had my OBGYN rotation, my first one of third year. And then I think my pediatric one was in November. And I remember I was set. I knew I was doing OB, like there's nothing I was going to change my mind. And then somebody told me, like maybe a month before my pediatric rotation, hey, you know, I think you would be good in pediatrics. And it kind of like planted the seed. And then after I did my pediatric rotation, I loved pediatrics. I thought it was an amazing rotation. And then looking back, I saw that there were other things that kind of, you know, led up to why pediatrics was such a good fit for me. For example, I volunteered in child life in high school. But my whole experience of wanting to be a doctor kind of started at a children's hospital. And I actually had the pleasure to do a rotation at that very same hospital that I was volunteering as a child life so many years earlier. I think number two is the biggest hitter for this that made me end up choosing pediatrics, because I just had such an amazing experience rotating as a medical student at my given hospital, which is actually where I ended up matching. So I love that hospital so much that that's where I knew I wanted to be. And the experience of being at a standalone hospital also, I think, helped me choose pediatrics, because it was all surrounding pediatrics. All of our noon conferences and like our lectures were all at a pediatric hospital, and we were seeing these patients every day. And I was just surrounded by everyone, like everyone around me was, you know, in the field of pediatrics. So I think that really helped. And then I did well on the rotation. I got good feedback. I did well on the shelf exam. So all of that was like kind of positively building me up to making me think that, you know, this is probably the field for me. Mentors, that was another big thing. I had great mentors. I worked with attending, so I knew would write me excellent letters of recommendation, who told me, hey, you know, I think you would be great for pediatrics. Do you need a letter? That kind of stuff. And then I just found pediatrics to be a very family-friendly field. And to me, that was important because I had a significant other and he mattered, you know, now we're married, but at the time we were just dating. And that, you know, you have to take those things into consideration, because your life outside of medicine is super important too. And your happiness outside of residency is very, very important. So saying that basically kind of goes into the next point, how, you know, I wanted to be in a location that my partner could work in. So I liked how pediatrics kind of offered me more flexibility than, let's say, a more competitive field like OBGYN, especially since I was an IMG. I had to kind of deal with that. And as an IMG, it's much harder to match into a more competitive specialty. And so I knew with pediatrics that I had a pretty good chance at the program that I was rotating at. And I knew I loved Miami. And I also liked that I had flexibility to go to other locations and kind of choose exactly where I wanted to end up. And then I also wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do in the long run. I thought for a long time that I wanted to do oncology, pediatric oncology. And I think that was going back to the mentor thing. I had a lot of mentors in oncology. But now, of course, I changed my mind and I'm full blown going into GI. So go GI, woo. And then I also noticed that I loved working with kids and parents, which is also what I realized I loved in OBGYN. I loved working with the parents and talking to mom and educating about, breastfeeding and things to expect when, I go, like when they have their babies. And I felt like I fit in at where I was rotating. I went to medical school at St. George's University. So I went to the Caribbean to answer your question. Thanks. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of jump in, talk about what our day-to-day life is. As I kind of already mentioned, every block is different. So your schedule changes on a monthly basis, essentially. In the wards I would say are more of the tougher rotations, and tough meaning that you wake up early, you're at the hospital all day, and you have calls, and you don't really work. Like you don't get very many days off. You get one golden weekend. Basically, you only get one weekend off a month. But in general, I would wake up 5:45-ish, depending how close you live to the hospital. Maybe you can wake up a little later, or if you can just literally stroll out of bed, maybe you can go a little later too. I get to the hospital usually by 6:30, pre-round on my patients. Then I round with the team around 10, 11 is when rounds start, but it's very attending dependent. Then we have our designated time for noon conference. Afternoon, I'll run the list with our team. Sometimes I'll like do a quick, afternoon cafecito because we're here in Miami. So gotta love the coladas and the cafecitos here. And then we go back to the floor, follow up on anything you had to do, call some specialists, follow up on the specialists, make sure all your patients got their medications or had, let's say, imaging that they needed to get done, make sure everything was done and followed up. Then you sign out. On call is very different depending where you go to residency. For us as interns, on call means being the late resident, and then you have a night resident, but we also on call when you're a second or third year actually means a 24-hour shift. And so your calls will vary depending on what program you match into. And then I kind of have a quick slide on ICU. So ICU is a little bit more intense. And so basically it's very similar, but the on-call person actually stays overnight for the 24. And usually that happens like every 4 days, you have an on-call 24-hour resident. So if you guys have any questions after 24-hour, lots of questions about 24-hour shifts. Those are great questions. I feel like I should wait till the end, but just to like a brief general thing, they're actually not as bad as you think. So we'll jump into it a little bit more in detail at the very end, and I'll go in full detail because I know when I was in your shoes, I was thinking, okay, first of all, night shifts, heck no. Second of all, 24-hour shifts, will I be alive? So I have a lot of information about that. We can definitely go into detail towards the end or during our Q&A. And then clinic is when we say, oh, clinic is our like the good life, it's not no night shifts, no 24-hour calls. You wake up later, you get to sleep in, and it's more like the 9 to 5 type job, even though not necessarily because I didn't get off of work until like 6:30 today, but you get the point. So every day is a little different, but sometimes you get lucky, you get to leave a little earlier, and sometimes you have to stay. And then this is more in clinic, you see more of the general pediatrics cases, more family bonding with the parents and the kids, and a lot of counseling. And then elective, kind of same deal. Depends if your elective is inpatient elective or outpatient, and it just varies depending on the elective. So now I have a couple of pictures. This is, of course, my residency program. So everywhere is going to be a little different. Like I said earlier, I go to Nicholas Children's Hospital. I'm in Miami, Florida. So it is a standalone children's hospital, which does come with more fun, in my opinion. And our program is very big. This is my class, just my class. So multiply this by 3 and you have our full residency program. So it's a very large program. If you guys have any questions about pros and cons of large programs versus smaller programs. We can definitely talk about that at the end. So learning new skills. I wanted to also put endoscopies and colonoscopies, but I didn't have any pictures of me actually performing them. But our program, it's kind of cool because we have a very heavy GI program. So we do get to do them as residents. Not everywhere you can. My favorite thing in residency is lacerations when it comes to procedures. So in residency, you do get to do procedures as a pediatric resident. And in my experience, the ones that you do most frequently are laceration repair, so LACs, and LPs, so lumbar punctures. So we do that a lot because anytime you have neonatal sepsis, you need to do, or suspected neonatal sepsis, you're going to have to do an LP. So this is me on the first day during, I don't know if it was the actual first day, but the first week of residency and orientation, working on a pig's foot. And then that was one of my earlier laceration repairs. Not perfect. I've gotten much better since then, but just to kind of give you an idea that you do get to learn cool skills in residency, and even in pediatric residency, you do get to, hone your skills. One thing I got really involved in, especially this year, is the wellness committee. So I'm actually head of my wellness committee, and most residency programs out there will offer committees like research committee, a scholarly activity committee, wellness committee, global health committee, you name it. They have different, AAP committee too. So you name it, they have a lot. So the one thing that I got really into was wellness. So here's some of the wellness pictures. We did a paint week. We had breakfast for the residents. In November, we had like a November dessert, like breakfast thing. In October, we did a bake-off, like a Halloween spooky bake-off. That was a winner in the corner. One of the residents made the witch cupcakes that were super good. And I made the little Rice Krispies, the little monster Rice Krispies. And then we did pumpkin decorating. And then this is my baby Lula, who's outside the door. I'm surprised she hasn't barked yet. So in residency, I got a puppy. It's doable. They're a lot of work. She's much bigger now, but I brought her to the hospital and we did kind of like a little activity with the puppy, or activity as in playtime with the puppy right after conference. Or during conference, because it was COVID still. So our conferences were online, but now they're actually in person. And then around Christmas time, we did tree decoration. So the one in the bottom left corner, we did a tree decorating contest. And then we had a hot cocoa bar, and then we did ornament decorations. And then other great things about residency is that you get to hang out with each other. The top left picture was pre-COVID. The bottom pictures are during COVID, as you can see. So even if we're at work or outside of work, we can still hang out with each other and have fun. The residency is definitely hard. There's no doubt about it. But what matters is the people that you surround yourself with, and your life, like I said many times, your life outside of residency is important too. And then of course, you can't forget, giving back to the community. So the left, that was me after my first COVID shot. So fully vaccinated, whoop, whoop. And then the middle and the bottom left was kind of, we did this toy drive. And then the right and bottom, we were kneeling for Black Lives Matter. And then of course, in a pediatric hospital, you cannot forget dress up days. So the left pictures are actually our intern class. We were doing, to keep morale up, they were doing dress up days every single Friday. And they actually did a Harry Potter dress up, and there's 3 different inpatient wards. So they kind of did it like a battle, like who can dress up better. And they split it up in like the house, like different Harry Potter houses. And then in the middle was an ugly sweater contest. And then on the right was Halloween. And that was in my intern year. And then just in general, goofing around, enjoying the time in the hospital too. So just a couple pictures about residency, and, hopefully it gets you guys excited for what's to come. And then finally, this is my friend Anna and her baby. She just had a baby in July, and I was really lucky, and I was able to be her pediatrician for a day, or her daughter's pediatrician for a day. Her and I actually we did a rotation together as medical students. We went to different medical schools, but we did a 4th-year elective together, and then we ended up matching together. So it's really nice. So basically, the point of this is that you can have fun in residency. Residency is hard, but there's a lot of ways to get involved in the hospital and things to do outside of the hospital. And I mean, of course, I'm biased, but pediatric residency is pretty great. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to talk, I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions about, what's to come. And as a residency advisor, I am so excited to answer any of the questions you might have about just applying in general. So just to wrap it up, in general, for those of you who are not 100% peds, that's okay. I firmly believe that you can be happy in multiple fields. I really don't think that there's one field in medicine that you 100% fit in. And even for the ones who are so set on pediatrics, I want you to remember this, because next year or the following year, whenever you match into residency, you're going to have experienced some really hard times and hard moments. And maybe that's just feeling burnt out because you haven't had a day off in 15 days or something crazy. Or maybe you saw a really sad case and now you're thinking, oh my gosh, terrible things happen to good people. Just remember that, it doesn't, like, you picked that field. You can be happy in other fields, but you pick that field, and like, there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. And that's kind of what goes back to like why your life does matter outside, because you have to be able to cope with like some of the hard things you see, especially in pediatric residency, because it can be very hard. There's very sad cases that you see on a regular basis. Also, you don't need to know what you want to do in 10 years. And if you don't know what you want to do in 10 years, pediatrics is great because it opens the opportunity to explore different avenues and potentially explore and find a subspecialty that you might love and you just haven't really figured it out yet. And then now to finally wrap things up, make sure you have a game plan, because match day is in 2 weeks. And before you know it, you're going to have a token. You're available to apply for your token in June. And then before you know it, all of a sudden it's September and you're applying. So things to think about now are letters of recommendation. If you're going to pediatrics, highly recommend getting all of your letters from pediatrics. If you know 100% that's what you want to do, if possible, get them all from pediatrics. You don't have to, but if you can, I recommend it. And also, when you are getting your letters, make sure they're from academic doctors or attendings if possible. So try to go for the attending who you worked with at a standalone children's hospital with a residency program versus an outside clinic doctor who runs his own practice. And we can, if you have any questions about that, we can definitely, talk about that more. Personal statement. Personal statements are very challenging and they're very discouraging and they take a long time to get right. So start working on them earlier. Basically, when it comes to personal statements, just assume that you're going to have to rewrite it like 5 to 10 times. So write it, put it away. Read it a week later, fix it up. Rewrite it, send it to a friend, read it again, rewrite it. I mean, this is the experience with personal statements. And I am dreading writing my personal statement for fellowship. And just remember, you are going to be a doctor or already are a doctor. Your specialty is not writing personal statements. So go out and have people read your personal statements and take constructive feedback and just keep redoing it until you make it perfect. Then you need your CV and resume. So start thinking about what you want to put on your resume or the things you did in med school, because you don't want to miss anything. And you also want to have a CV ready for when you ask for your letters of recommendation. This fourth bullet is so important. If you get anything out of this entire webinar, please apply on time. The worst thing you can do for your application is to miss the deadline. So find out when and I know they haven't really announced anything yet because of COVID, But once they announce a deadline, put it in your calendar, set reminders, make sure you are done. Everything is perfect days before. And make sure whatever, even if you are missing letters of recommendation, you submit on time. And then finally, try to take step 2 in August, early August, so that you have results back by the time your application goes out, because why not? It looks better. If you have everything there as a complete application, it looks better. All right, so let me just wrap up by telling you a little bit more about MST. I love MST. I'm obviously very biased. They're kind of my favorite. I do not see myself not being an MST. I mean, it's been since 2017 and I still love MST. I still work for them almost just as much as I did, surprisingly, in medical school. So the reason I love it is it's really a family and they just offer everything for everyone. So it doesn't matter what, like whatever issue you might have, whatever thing you are looking for, like maybe it's applying to residency, maybe it's studying for your shelf exam and trying to do really well on your pediatric shelf exam. Maybe it's studying for step 2, whatever it is, or maybe it's just a schedule. Maybe you need to just meet with a tutor one time, have a planning session, figure out what you need to do in order to reach XYZ goal. Let's say you're applying for pediatric residency, you just want to meet one time with a tutor, make sure you're on track, everything is good. We offer that too. So the beautiful thing about Med School Tutors is that anything you need, we're here for you. Just reach out to us. We have our email down here below, hq@medschooltutors.com, and we'll be happy to help you. All right, so questions. So I know there's so many, like I see the chat box is blowing up. So I'm going to start from the top and I'm going to go down and hopefully we can answer everything. Okay, let's see. Would you say choosing a specialty is better than going into general pediatrics? That is very dependent on the person. And I would say no, because general pediatrics has a lot of awesome things that go along with it. You have your clinic days, you get continuity of care, you get to see your kids growing up, you see a lot of healthy kids, so you're not really seeing a lot of like sad cases as often. You can have your own clinic, you could join a group. General pediatrics is wonderful. Like I have legitimately no problem going to Gen Peds if fellowship doesn't work out. I just love GI and I just found a passion, and I love that GI offers procedures and outpatient time and inpatient time and kind of more variety. Because like I mentioned, I'm a person of, I like variety. So that's what I really liked about that, but definitely not there. I wouldn't say choosing a specialty is way better than Gen Peds. Also, there's a lot of specialties out there in pediatrics, unfortunately, that make less than general pediatricians. So that's something you have to be cognizant about. I'm sure all of you know that, pediatricians on average make less than physicians in adult medicine. That's something you do have to be aware of and consider. And for a lot of people, especially if you have a lot of medical school debt, going into a specialty may not always be the best financial choice for you. So I would just say, do what you love. I know everyone tells you that, but don't feel like you have to go into a specialty if you go into pediatrics. Being a general pediatrician is beautiful and wonderful. And if that's what you want to do, that's awesome. Where did I go to med school? I mentioned St. George's. I went to the Caribbean. I'm a little confused. Do you do the residency while you are in med school or after? Residency happens after medical school. So when you are, depends what your situation is, but traditionally you apply for a residency in your 4th year and you match in March of your 4th year and you would start the next year. I was wondering where you completed your undergraduate degree. I went to UF, go Gators, University of Florida. And then, okay, the 24-hour shifts. Okay, I was telling you guys this earlier that they're not as bad as everyone says they are. So you actually do get to sleep sometimes on your shift. I know that's like really crazy, but it's true. I haven't done the PICU yet. That's one of my rotations, like at the end of my 2nd year. And that's the one rotation that infamously you don't really get to sleep during. But The other rotations that we do have 24-hour calls are the NICU, neonatology unit, and our hematology oncology floor. And I've had a lot of good luck in the sense that I do at least get 2 to 3 hours on average per shift. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but you always have the next day off, at least in my program. So you kind of get to recuperate that way. And you also, it's kind of nice because you have a post-call day. So you have like the full day. And in my opinion, I think I personally would take a 24-hour call over a night shift any day of the week. I just feel like with night shifts, it's nonstop. You're going through the night to the morning and it's 5 in a row. While a 24-hour call is usually like every 4 days or so. Let me see if I have any. Okay. And then someone asked me why GI. So I kind of already mentioned that. I like the variety. I like the procedures. I also am really interested in nutrition and well-being. I'm very pro wellness, if you haven't noticed already. And I'm really into like plant-based nutrition and diet. And then I just find GI pathologies to be very interesting. We have a lot of IBD cases at my hospital, and those are really interesting, knowing the different immunosuppressive medications out there to treat these patients with. So I can definitely go on for quite a bit, but I do love GI, and I think it's just a really nice field with a lot of variety. Do you think international students can get into med school without a full resume? Queen, I think it says, if you can expand on that question a little bit more, that would be awesome, because I don't really know exactly what you mean. I'm assuming you mean like maybe you are missing certain things in your application. So if you could give me a little bit more specifics, that'd be great. Would my experiences outside of the US count towards getting into pediatrics? I worked in Peds, ER, and NICU. I would say you should definitely include that in your resume. Absolutely. And a good way to include that and really kind of show how it impacted you and your decisions to go into pediatrics is to expand on it in your personal statement. So what if you're interested in pediatrics and internal medicine? Those are opposites. I can't decide. Let me tell you, you are not alone. If any of you are feeling like you like multiple fields, or you are thinking about applying to pediatric and a different specialty, there's nothing wrong with that, and you should do that. In fact, one of my really good co-residents, it's like one of my best friends here in my residency program, he actually applied to both internal medicine and pediatrics, and he thought that he was more for IM and ended up just loving his pediatric interviews, and then ended up ranking all the pediatric programs first. And then I have a couple other friends who did a little bit of both and ended up loving certain, like, for example, I had a student who was applying ER and Peds and ended up really liking her Ped rotations, and still ranked EM super high, but also ranked pediatrics in the middle. So that's where I kind of go back to, you can be happy in multiple specialties, because a lot of it has to do with the program you're at, the location, who your support system, and other factors within residency and outside of residency that are important too. So when you're making your decision, if you are in between Peds and IM, or even if it's Peds and you're in between 2 or 3 residency programs that you're interviewing at, think about the other factors. So at the end of the day, you're living in this new location for 3 years. So the people who you're going to be at this program with, and the people outside of the program, your friends, your family, all of that matters. Is research very important? Research is always going to be a positive on your application, but I would say for pediatrics, it's not as important. So if you don't have any research, or you have very little research, don't worry. It's fine. You can still match into a great program with little to no research. Did you take the MCAT before going to med school? If yes, do you recommend taking it if you were in a four-year college? My school required the MCAT, so I did take the MCAT. data for the tutoring cost, it's very dependent on how many sessions you're going to have. So that's a great question that Neri can answer. And if she doesn't answer here through the chat, you can email it, or even just send us an email about that question, or schedule a free consult and we can give you more information. Okay. How easy is it for IMGs to get into a Peds specialty? I know for SGU, you have the opportunity to do rotations in the US, and they also have LCME accreditation, but for another medical school such as UWI in Trinidad, how difficult is the move? That's actually a really, really good question. I would say in general, pediatrics is pretty relatively friendly for IMGs. I would say the 3 specialties that are most friendly for, and this is just through my experience, I don't really know, just my experience as a residency advisor and seeing my IMG friends go through it, I would say that the most IMG friendly programs tend to be FM, IM, and Peds. So I think that you still will have the, ideally you would do a rotation if possible. If you could do a rotation in the US, that's of course would be the best. If you can't, I don't think that's going to totally discredit you. I think I would have to kind of go into your situation a little bit more to kind of get to know exactly what you're going through and like what kind of clinical background you actually have. But I know there's still a lot of people who match into residency with little clinical experience in the US. Of course, if you can get it, do it. If not, just apply to more programs. And I would, of course, recommend residency advising if possible, since it is a little bit more challenging if you don't have clinical experience, but it's definitely possible. What's important for applying to fellowship? Are the USMLEs still important? From what I've been told, and from my experience, your step 1 is important for a fellowship. In fact, step 1 weighs more heavily for fellowship applications than step 3, surprisingly. So USMLEs are always going to kind of follow you no matter where you go. That being said, it doesn't mean it's not possible to match into a great fellowship program or residency program if your USMLEs aren't super high, but just keep it in mind. And when you do get into residency, take step 3 seriously, especially if you want to go into fellowship and your other scores are a little on the lower end. You want to take step 3 a little bit more seriously. Would you say that being in pediatrics offers a good work-life balance? I would say being in residency does not offer the best work-life balance, but I would say in general, pediatrics tends to be more on the good work-life balance friendly spectrum. In general, residency, what makes residency really hard is, burnout. Just working long hours, not getting weekends, doing 24-hour shifts every 4 days for a whole month. That's hard, especially if you're not getting much sleep during your shifts. So it's really important to focus on your wellness, really take time during your residency and even in medical school to take a step back and think about what's important and try to give yourself a break every once in a while. I know we can be really hard on ourselves, but work-life balance is important and your mental health is important. So it's always good to take a step back and kind of reassess and, realize that you are enough and you're doing things great and you're going to be an amazing doctor one day. What are some of the extreme cases that you've seen in pediatrics? Whew, that is a very loaded question. And because we're running a little bit low on time, I'm not really going to go into that one, especially because a lot of my cases are sad. But if you want to reach out to us, I would be happy to talk about that in more detail. What was your experience at a Caribbean school? You guys are awesome. You guys are killing it with the questions. Thank you guys so much for being so involved. What was your experience at a Caribbean medical school? So my experience was very positive. I would say not everyone has a positive experience. I loved living in Grenada. I thought Grenada was beautiful. I had a great experience there. It really gave me a lot of perspective. It helped me be grateful for the things I have and the opportunities I'm given. Of course, it came with pros and cons. There were a lot of obstacles I had to face as an IMG, but I wouldn't go back and change that experience for anything. I'm who I am today because of my experience going to St. George's and living in the Caribbean and having to overcome all those obstacles. So Varshini asked about the work-life balance and difficulties during residency. So I kind of already mentioned it, but the biggest thing is, the burnout and really noticing when you're feeling burnt out. And it is not uncommon to feel, and also in medical school, to feel depressed sometimes and feel like your mental health is out of check. And you're going to feel that when you're not getting a lot of sleep and you're not really having time for yourself, and you're working crazy hours and jumping from day shifts and night shifts and doing 24-hour calls. I mean, it's going to happen. So like I said before, take a step back. You are enough. You can do this, and just kind of, give yourself some time. And meditation is actually really great. Meditation, yoga, and exercise have been my lifesavers, and eating healthy. How do you find time, opportunity to pursue research and or academic interests with a busy clinical schedule? That is a great question. It is so challenging to do that because you are just so busy. A lot of the times you just go to work, come home, eat dinner, and you're like exhausted, I want to go to sleep. It gets better. First year is very hard. I would say in first year, most people don't really have time to pursue any academic interests. I'm not saying, I'm more so in the beginning. And then later towards the end, they kind of pick up these case reports and they will send their case reports to different like big meetings. For example, like GI, NASPGHAN. So I would say in your first year, try not to worry too much about academic interests until towards the end, and try to make it a goal to submit maybe a goal of 2 or 3 case reports to a national conference, and then try to figure out maybe some research opportunities at the end of first year going into second year, because in pediatric residency, pediatric residents tend to have more time in second year than they do in first year, at least in my experience as a resident. What do you like about pathology? It scared me when I did an internship and saw the field. Trevina, can you expand on that question a little bit more? In terms of what specifically scared you, and what kind of pathology are you asking about? Follow up on personal statements. Would you suggest mentioning any setbacks or keep it completely positive? So that answer varies depending on who you ask, but since you're asking me, I say keep it positive. I personally think that the personal statement is a way to highlight you as an individual and all the great things about you. You're selling yourself. Your personal statement is your way of selling yourself to the program. So I personally think you should keep it positive. If you have negative flags or setbacks, they're going to bring it up during the interview, and you should have a really good response to discuss that when it's brought up. But I personally don't think that it's great to keep in the personal statement. That being said, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't. I just think it's really hard to talk about setbacks and then swing it into something positive at the end, just because we're not the best writers. So if you can take a setback and you can turn it into something so positive and so great about you, then absolutely go for it. But I think that's very hard. So if you feel like that's challenging, I would just try to keep it positive, but have a good answer for when an interviewer asks you about those setbacks. You said that you applied to residency after 4 years of medical school. What if you were in 4 years of college? Is it the same process? Adama, you might have to expand on that because I'm trying to figure out what situation you're in. Because at least traditionally you go to medical school. So I'm assuming maybe your medical school is like a combined college. So if you give me a little bit more detail, I can answer that better. Laura says, I was only able to do outpatient pediatrics for my core. And after doing my other cores, I felt that 100% nothing beat peds for me. It is naive of me to make a jump without seeing peds from an inpatient. Thankful. I mean, I do recommend, if possible, it's great to do an inpatient pediatric rotation because it is very different from outpatient pediatrics. But if you are super set on pediatrics from an outpatient general pediatrics rotation, that's great. I don't think it's naive. I think if you have a calling, no matter where and what situation brought that calling, you should pursue it. Just trust your gut. It's very hard. I mean, I kind of mentioned you can be happy in multiple fields. So, and it's your experiences through medical school that are going to kind of mold you into like that, or going to help mold that decision, if that makes sense. So I really believe that maybe if I wasn't in Miami doing my rotation at this amazing hospital, if I was somewhere else doing a rotation, then maybe I wouldn't have gone to pediatrics, and I probably would have still been happy and still found a field that I love. So if you have that inclination to go into pediatrics and you don't really understand why, and you haven't really seen all the avenues of pediatrics, so you're kind of like not sure, it doesn't matter. It's okay. You could apply to more than one specialty. I don't recommend applying more than two. So remember, that's a new personal statement. That's more letters of recommendation, but that's okay. And just know like your experiences like that you are having now are shaping that decision. And if you really feel strongly towards pediatrics or even a different field, just go for it. Trust your gut and trust that everything is going to go the way that it should. Okay. Any advice on how to find rotations in the US as an IMG during COVID? That is very challenging. I would say it's getting better. I think some programs are starting to take students. I know our program is taking students again. I don't know exactly how they're doing with away rotations from like non-affiliated places, but if you are really interested in doing a rotation in the US, I would do a really strong search. Start looking, just start finding cities that you feel like you either have family that you could stay for free, because cost is always going to be a thing, and cities that you would like to live in, and just go on their website, see if they offer any rotations for medical students. And if they do, email, and just send out a bunch of emails and hope that like maybe somebody's going to respond. And you might have more luck than you realize, and you won't know until you try. So I would say just go out there and, ask as many programs as possible. But now, okay, so I could not volunteer because of personal reasons. Now I'm a junior in college, but I can't find places to volunteer or doctors to shadow, so my resume is empty. Also, I'm an international student. Do you think medical school is still possible? I think for medical school, scores are very important, how you do in your classes. So your MCAT and your grades take precedence. So you can have a ton of amazing things on your resume and not do well in your classes and do well on your MCAT, and it's not really going to matter. So if you have a great grades, great MCAT, and your resume isn't super impressive, you can still add things on, and you can get involved in things that aren't medicine per se. I think with everything going on, especially with COVID, they're going to be more understanding this year. A lot of doctors are probably not taking students to shadow, but there's always ways to volunteer. Just find something you're interested. I think when I was in medical school, I just got really interested in gun violence prevention. I joined a local gun violence prevention group, and I got really involved in that. And I ended up talking about it in my personal statement. So you can get involved in a lot of ways and then swing it towards medicine. And yes, MST does offer residency advising. I think we're going to wrap up now. And you guys were so amazing. Good luck with everything. If this pediatrics is your dream, just keep it up, pursue it. It is definitely doable. And thank you so much, everyone. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I hope you found this webinar to be helpful, and I wish you all the best of luck.